What's up, guys? Welcome back to episode 4 of the SNS Sportscast. Today, we're bringing you guys way too early fantasy football predictions and rankings. That's Santa. I'm Sack here. As always, we're going to be bringing you our top 10 from each position, starting with the quarterbacks, the running backs, the wide receivers, and the tight ends. Matt, you did your top 10 rankings for each position. I did my top 10. We're just going to pull up both the graphics, and we're going to go over where we agree and where we disagree. So you can start talking as we see the first two you and I have in flipped order. You had Mahomes, I had Lamar. How come you had Mahomes?
Well, I like Mahomes. I mean, he got hurt last year for a couple games. I believe he missed two. Super Bowl MVP of the league 2 seasons ago. I mean, there's nothing you can't like about him. His weapons are just off the charts. I mean, he's got speedster and Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, maybe the best tight end in the league. So, I mean, you can't really go against him. The reason why I have him over Lamar is I think that the Ravens do take a step back offensively this year, as I think that everything went right for them last year. I don't know if you could agree with me on that one.
So I'm not really thinking about the Ravens in terms of offense and planning and whatnot. The reason I just took Lamar Jackson is because I'm looking at this strictly from a fantasy point of view. And when he goes up against Mahomes, the one thing that gives Lamar the edge is that running ability. No matter how much a team's going to plan for Lamar Jackson, he's going to do circles around them, break their ankles when they try and tackle him, and he's going to run for, 150 yards a game and a couple touchdowns. And he can throw the ball accurate as well. And I think his accuracy is going to improve as well. Now, I'm not taking anything away from Mahomes. He's obviously an MVP, Super Bowl MVP also. Mahomes was a stud a couple years ago, but, he's a little more one-dimensional than Lamar Jackson. So that's why I still give Lamar Jackson the edge, but Mahomes coming in second by a couple points.
Yeah, see, look, it's a viable argument there. I mean, of course, Lamar's really, his legs are his best aspect. He can throw the ball. Don't get me wrong. Anybody that says he can't is wrong. I mean, he can definitely throw the ball. He can sling it as well as most people in the league. It's just, in my opinion, I think that defenses weren't ready for what Lamar Jackson was going to bring last year. I know that they saw a little bit of him 2 seasons ago, and he was very successful even then. But last year, I mean, his ability to run the ball and his ability to step back and stay in the pocket and throw the ball were just something unbelievable, something nobody really was expecting to come. I mean, if you look at his MVP odds were like 60-1 last year. Anybody that had $5 on that guy won some good money.
On a nice pretty penny, yeah.
Yeah. So but the reason why, like I said, I think that don't get me wrong. I mean, I have him as number 2. I kind of I have him as number 7. I still think he's going to be a very, very successful fantasy quarterback for anybody that takes him. I just think
1, 2.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I'm just looking here at both our rankings. So our next 4, we all have the same. We just have way different orders. I got Wilson at 3. You got Wilson at 6. I want to hear your take on why you have Wilson so low when, he's been a top 3 quarterback in fantasy ranking strictly for the past, 4 or 5 years. And once again, he brings you that running dynamic ability. And Wilson, it just seems like puts up 30 to 40 points on any given week. So I'm curious on why you have him so far at 6.
Well, the reason why I have Russell Wilson at 6 instead of like a top 3 quarterback is, once again, I mean, he was really good last year, 31 touchdowns, 5 picks. I just don't think that their weapons are that great, in my opinion. I know Metcalf was pretty good last year as a number 2, but Tyler Lockett, to me, is not a number 1 wide receiver guy. I think that he's one that benefits off of Russell Wilson, which, of course, I mean, if you look at other quarterbacks, like Tom Brady's done it his whole career. He's made other guys better. But I don't know. I'm not sold on the weapons. I think that the division's tough, and I think that Wilson takes a step back, as he actually wasn't as good on the ground last year as many people think, with only 342 yards and a couple TDs.
Right. I agree with that, but it's just he's a point producer in fantasy, so that's why I got him 3. You have him 6. They're all alternative.
Yeah.
Speaking with him, Kyler, and Dak Prescott, they're all similar type quarterbacks.
Yeah, agreed. Interchangeable. It really is. Like, as much as I say him, he's at 6. He could easily be, number 3, and I'm not going to argue with that much. It's like just my reasoning why he's a little behind, in my opinion.
Right. So looking at 7 to 10 here, I have Drew Brees at 7. You don't even have him in the top 10 for you. You have Aaron Rodgers. I left Aaron Rodgers out. So I want to know a little of your thinking on why you didn't like Drew Brees in the top 10.
Not that I don't like Drew Brees. It's just I like Aaron Rodgers here, and I like bounce-back seasons from him and Matt Ryan as well, and Tom Brady. Aaron Rodgers, in my opinion, to do a bounce-back, I think people are writing him off. I think especially with this signing of Jordan Love, I think he's going to come out with a little bit of fire this year. And
Right.
he's gonna get a healthy Devontae Adams. I mean, that could help me.
Mhm.
I mean, I was a quarterback,
Right.
so
Exactly. Mhm.
that's why I think Rodgers. Nothing against Breeze. I drafted him last year as
Mhm.
my starting quarterback at the beginning, but I just think that Rodgers is more inclined for a uptick in production this year.
Yep, and one guy we haven't discussed, but we both have him in our top 10, you at 9, myself at 8, is Josh Allen. Josh
Mhm.
Allen, this kid was a stud last year. I know I took him in a 16-team league in like the 15th round as my backup quarterback to Deshaun Watson, and that worked out real well
Yep.
because we saw the ability of Allen to move the ball both on his legs and through the air, and now he's got a guy like Stephon Diggs that's only going to make him that much better.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. He has a lot of weapons in Buffalo. The only thing you got to be careful with him is he does like to turn the ball over.
Right.
As long as he, limits the fumbles and
Mhm.
tries not to do too much, he's a very good threat and easy a top 10 quarterback in my opinion this
Right.
upcoming year.
Yep, he took a huge leap. And my one sleeper for my quarterback position is Danny Dimes for the
Yeah.
Giants. I mean, listen, he's not a winning quarterback, but he puts up points for fantasy. And like I said, I'm not talking about winning quarterbacks. When it comes to fantasy rankings, you got to, put the blinders on and see who gets the most points. And there was a couple weeks where Danny Dimes was throwing 4 or 5 touchdowns.
Yeah, no, listen, he definitely has that ability. He does throw the
Mhm.
ball all over the place. He fumbles a little bit, but he didn't throw a lot of picks. I mean, I
Right.
think he had like 25 touchdowns to like 12 picks last year or something
Yeah.
like that. And I mean, that's pretty damn good. He's
Yeah.
speaking, he didn't play the whole season.
Right. He missed a couple of games and he
Yeah,
also sat a couple with Eli. So
exactly.
you
Yeah,
have a
and I
you have
do
a
have a sleeper. Yes, that's what I was going to get into. Mine is Baker Mayfield. I think people are starting to write him off already too. He was maybe the most accurate quarterback to come out of college, other than now like Joe Burrow. Um, but I just think that Baker has a lot of weapons around him. I think the Browns are
he
due for
does.
a little bit of a bounce back here. I think that they did a good job signing offensive linemen and drafting Wills, and I just think that he has a lot of weapons. I
Mhm.
also, you'll see in a little bit, a reason why I believe in him, as I have some of his playmakers ranked pretty high this year as well.
I'm looking forward to that. So, speaking of playmakers, we're going to go to probably the most electrifying position in fantasy. We're going to move it on to our top 10 running back rankings. And you and me, we both have the exact same top 4. So, I mean, that's pretty obvious. Christian McCaffrey, he's the best player in fantasy. He'll
Mhm.
undoubtedly be the number 1 pick.
Yep.
Barkley, Zeke, Dalvin Cook, all studs, all great. And then you and I have a little bit of a difference. You have
Mhm.
Derrick Henry here. I have Alvin Kamara. So tell me what you like about Derrick Henry, because last year he wasn't even in top 15 running backs, which is just crazy to think about.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I had to deal with one of my buddies getting Derrick Henry in like the 5th round last
Yep.
year and knocking me out of the playoffs because of that. So, yeah, I like Henry. I think that the
Mhm.
guy is just an absolute workhorse back. I think that they have Ryan Tannehill locked in as their quarterback, which I mean
Yeah.
he had a pretty good year last year, but I
Mhm.
think they're going to try to feed him as much as
Yeah.
they can. I mean,
Henry's numbers skyrocketed as soon
yeah.
as Tannehill came in.
Exactly. And you saw that. I mean, look what they did in the playoffs. I think
Right.
Tannehill threw like, 20 passes in 2
Yeah.
games or something like that.
That's all he needs. That's all he
So,
has.
and
Has to.
also, another interesting thing, I just have to throw this in there, is I feel like Derrick Henry gets more 1-yard rushing touchdowns than anybody I've ever seen.
Oh, yeah.
It's really weird.
Right. It's crazy. Tennessee always has the ball on the 1-yard line for some reason, and
So
they have
weird.
the best running back in football when you're within the 5-yard line. So,
Yeah. Now, yeah, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on
Mhm.
Kamara. I know you have Brees hot this year. Is that the reason why you have Kamara? Because I tell you what, he just didn't live up to expectations as he's supposed to have last year.
He did not. You're right. But the reason I have Kamara there, I'm going on now. My thinking here is based on PPR rules, so points per reception. When you put
Right.
Alvin to Derrick Henry, more of the upside, in my opinion, has to go to Kamara because he's going to catch way more passes than Derrick Henry, who's only basically a running threat.
Hmm.
And listen, Alvin had a really letdown year compared to what he did in his rookie season. So if my thinking is the Saints, they're going to have to try and target Kamara way more than they did a year ago, because when you think 2 years ago when the Saints were almost unbeatable, guess what they were doing? They were dumping the ball off to Alvin and then hitting Mike Thomas in the flat.
Yep.
So I think they got to get back to basics and constantly hit Alvin Kamara with passes. So that's why I put him at 5. Granted, it may not happen, but I like the upside.
Yeah, listen, he's still a top 10. Maybe, I have him at number 7. He's still a top 10 running back as he's a dual threat, and he is really talented.
Yeah.
But who I like even more is the guy I have squeezed in between Henry and Kamara. At number 6, I have Nick Chubb.
Mhm.
Here we go with the Browns playmakers. They have an upgraded offensive line. Chubb was really good last year.
He was.
The only thing about him, which I don't know if you felt the same way. Whenever I watched the Browns games, I felt like the Browns would get into the red zone and like within the 10, like even like 5, couldn't figure out how to punch it in.
You're right. He wouldn't score. Right.
He couldn't figure it out. Like I remember there was one game where they tried it with him. They ran the ball in 3 times in a row, and then I
remember that.
And then they called a penalty, so they got 4 more shots at it. They tried it 2 more times, and he still couldn't get in.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I like Chubb. I think that the offensive line is going to help, and this a resurgence from Baker Mayfield will allow defenses to not just keen in and stack the box on Nick Chubb.
Yeah, I love Chubb. I had him last year in one of my leagues. I took him a little too early because I thought he was going to be the everything guy. Later in the year, they had Kareem Hunt. He was catching a lot of passes, taking a lot of points away from Chubb. I do love Chubb, but if you look at his points, if he doesn't give you at least 1 touchdown a week, you're looking at, 90 rushing yards, no touchdowns. That's 9 points because he's not going to catch that many passes. Mm-hmm. So I still have him in my top 10, of course. I put him all the way down at 9, and I have Aaron Jones at 7 because if Aaron Jones can do what he did in the second half of last season, he was a top 4 running back in fantasy football down the stretch last year. Catches, passes, runs, you name it. I love Aaron Jones. I'm all in on him.
Yeah. I mean, look, Aaron Jones won me my league last year. Let's put it that way. I had no depth at running back, I thought, at least. And Aaron Jones just came out of nowhere and really took my team to another level. I like him. I think Rodgers is learning that he could dump the ball off to his running backs a little bit more, not just have to make a lot of plays by himself, which first time in a long time that Rodgers has had a talented running back to do this.
Exactly.
So that's another reason why I like Rodgers this year as well, is the ability to have a strong running game with 2 running backs with Jones and nice handicap in Jamal Williams, and now the newly drafted guy, what's his name, AJ Dillon, who I also think has a potential to unfortunately steal some touchdowns from Aaron Jones, but regardless, that happens to everybody. I like Jones a lot this year.
Now, looking at the bottom of both our rankings, we both agree on Chubb and Jones. Josh Jacobs, that's who I'm looking at. Obviously, Josh Jacobs is a top 10 guy. He's big touch by the Raiders, feed him constantly within the red zone. But what I'm very interested in is where we differ here. You have Austin Eckler. I have Joe Mixon. What was your thinking there?
Well, my thinking is, I don't know. Joe Mixon had a very, very quiet 1,000 yards last year.
Sneaky fantasy back is how I call Joe Mixon.
Yeah, he just was not real productive at the beginning of the season. So, I think a lot of people wrote him off. I mean, he ended with 1,100 yards, 5 touchdowns on the ground, and 3 more in the air. So, that's a pretty good year for a running back. It ended up, as PPR rankings, he finished 13th.
Yeah.
So I could definitely see him taking a step forward with a better quarterback. I agree with that.
Right.
But I think Eckler really gives you more there. There's no Melvin Gordon to take any of his touches around the red zone, and he's just a dynamic playmaker. He's a real good pass catcher, and I think when he's going to get the opportunity to run the ball even more this year. I think that he's going to be very productive. But you can't go wrong in my opinion. I think Eckler and Mixon are like kind of neck and neck, and
they are
they do their job in different ways though. So
yeah, I had Eckler coming in at 11. Listen, the only negative I could say about Eckler, I had him last year. I took him in the 6th round. It was an absolute steal for me in one of my leagues. The only difference is he doesn't have Phillip Rivers dumping the ball off to him anymore. He's going to have Tyrod Taylor or Justin Herbert later in the year. So I don't know their quarterback styles per se on how much they like to check it down. I know he's a huge threat in the passing game. So hopefully if you're, Austin Eckler fantasy owner, that the Chargers will scheme a game plan to constantly dump him the ball off because he's dynamic out in space. But he's a little too much of a question mark for me, where I know Joe Mixon is going to, hammer the football. They're going to give it to him a lot. So neck and neck, but I do love both of these guys. I'll take either one.
Yeah, and real quick, if you don't mind, I want to throw in not one but 2 sleeper picks I have for running backs. I'm going to do this really quick. First one is rookie running back Clyde Edwards-Helaire for the Kansas City Chiefs. This is strictly based on Patrick Mahomes and how dynamic that offense is. I think he fits Andy Reid's offensive scheme really well, and I think that he has the opportunity to explode with he just fits right in with that explosive up-tempo offense to me.
Yep.
And second, this might be a little biased, but I like Le'Veon Bell this year. I like him, not
Wow, that's funny.
necessarily.
Yeah, neither one of us had him in our top 10.
Yeah,
I think he was like the 5th overall pick in almost every league I heard last year.
exactly. Yeah, and look, I'm not necessarily even shooting top 10 here. I'm shooting close to it. If
Right.
he could sneak in the end, because I do think there's no way he has as bad of a year as he could have last year. He
Hmm.
had to go through so much different types of adversity between having a starting quarterback at mono and having to deal with a third string on his first 3 out of the 4 weeks of the season, having a crappy offensive line, and just not being included in the passing game as much as he thought he would
Hmm.
have. I know they brought in Frank Gore. I think that's all smoke. I think Frank Gore is just a nice change of pace back to him.
Yeah,
I think
Frank
that
Gore was
Bell
never.
has a pretty damn good season this year. I could see him getting 1,000 yards again and having a couple TDs in the air as well.
Two guys that I have on my radar to look out for definitely could crack the top 10. I mean, given no injury, but that's also a huge question mark. It's Todd Gurley down in Atlanta. If he is the slightest bit healthy, they are going to run him like a mule. He's going to get the football about 40 touches a game, constantly hit him in the pass game, whatever. Matt Ryan's going to feed Todd Gurley. That's all depending on if he's healthy. I don't know if he'll be a first-round pick. Definitely not in a 10-team league, but,
No.
your 12, 16-team leagues, he'll be early second round, possibly late first round of the 16-team league. I mean, I think if you could get a really good value for Todd Gurley, I love what he brings to the table if he's healthy. We don't know the status of his knee. Hopefully he's healthy. I don't know. He's getting all his money from the Rams, even though he's playing for the Falcons. But I think he fits this Falcons team perfectly if he's healthy. And also Miles Sanders. I mean, Miles Sanders was an absolute stud in Philly down the stretch. Him and Carson Wentz, they got that chemistry built. He was getting passes. He was getting great touches out of the backfield, running the ball hard. Miles Sanders could be possibly a top 10 running back by the end of the year in fantasy football when all is said and done. Just two guys to keep a look on. So now let's move it on to wide receivers. So looking at it, you and I, first 4, yep, 5 and 6. We alternate. You have Godwin. I have Tyreek Hill. And tell me why you like Godwin a little better than Hill.
Well, see, this is interesting because it goes against my whole theory of Pat Mahomes QB1. But that's not necessarily true at the same time. It's like, I think that Mahomes has a lot of options, and I think that Tyreek Hill is really good. Look, I have Tyreek Hill at 6, only one down lower than Godwin. I just think Godwin, I mean, he was so good last year. He had a lot of targets. I think that with Tom Brady, I think Godwin gives you a nice two-dimensional guy who could catch the ball underneath in the slot and on the outside. I like him there at 5. I like Hill at 6, but I can see it going either way.
Yeah.
It's not that much of a difference to me, in my opinion. I think Hill and Godwin are 5A and 5B, if you really want to put it that way. I think the top 4 solidified 4, and then 5A and 5B would be those two.
I just went Hill 5 just because you know what you're getting in Hill. Godwin, he was a stud last year, but you got to look at who he was a stud with. That was Jameis Winston. Tom Brady, who knows if he's going to like Evans better. Maybe, him and Gronk. We know Gronk's back in Tampa Bay. We know how much their relationship's been like over the past couple of years. Remember when New England, they went 2 tight end sets back in the old Aaron Hernandez days.
Yeah.
They were in New England together. So, the Bucs, they still have O.J. Howard. So I just don't know how Brady's going to fall in love with Godwin or Evans. I mean, I still think Evans, physically gifted, may still be the better of the 2 wide receivers. But, fantasy speaking, I think Godwin's better than Evans just based on last year's numbers. But it's going to be interesting to see who Tom Brady likes better. I went Tyreek Hill just because of the fact that him and Mahomes, they have a great connection.
Yeah, and listen, I definitely see that. And it's obvious, as you could see, that we both agree that Godwin and Evans are viable options in fantasy this year in general. I do think that the one thing about the receivers this year is there is a lot of depth, in my opinion.
Deep. You're right.
With talented receivers. I do think that the top 4 are, of course, I mean, I think they're better. I think that they're set in stone. I think those guys, every single one of them has a potential to be a first-round pick, depending on the size of the league. I wouldn't be surprised if people go 2 receivers in the first 2 rounds even this year, because I like the receivers. And if you want to go back into talking about running backs quick, I think that we agreed that there was a couple top guys, but then after that, it kind of feel like, once again, there's a drop off, but there's decent depth there too. So regardless, I think you can't go wrong with any of the top 4. I think even I just like receivers this year. What's
I do
really
too.
interesting is that we both went with Amari Cooper as a top 8 wide receiver this year. I think that's a
Yeah.
point that we should touch on a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I like Cooper, the fact that he's the established number one in Dallas. And, with Mike McCarthy taking over as head coach, we saw what he did with Aaron Rodgers all those years. Rodgers was slinging the ball constantly. Now I know it's going to be a little different because now he has Zeke in the backfield and a great offensive line to boot. But I do think Dak's going to throw the ball a lot and try and prove why he thinks he's worth $40 million. Between you and me, he ain't worth anywhere near $40 million. That's a whole different conversation for a whole nother day. But, I mean, I'll give him 30 tops. If Dak walks away if somebody gives me $30 million and I'm Dak Prescott, I'm taking that and running in a heartbeat. But he's going to try and prove, that he's worth 40, even though he's not. I love Amari Cooper. I think he's going to benefit from that. And now if you're the Cowboys, you got to worry about CeeDee Lamb. You got to worry about Michael Gallup, Blake Jarwin, the tight end, and then Zeke in the backfield. So there's a lot to cover in Dallas. And Amari Cooper, he's going to benefit from a lot of new weapons. And he's obviously Dak's number one go-to target. So I think he's going to feast this year.
Yeah, obviously we agree because we both have him ranked pretty high when if you look at all these other rankings, I don't even believe he comes in like top 10 in most of them. Right. I like him though. I mean, I think that he's poised for a big year, just got paid. And I think he's like you said, I think they're going to feed him the ball. And with the ability to have another viable receiver in CeeDee Lamb on the team, I think that it's going to allow Amari Cooper to have a little more freedom to do what he wants. And lastly, the last thing I think we should bring up, we both agree Kenny Galladay is a top 10 receiver, so we don't really need to get into him.
Nope.
He's solid. He just racks up the targets, very talented. But if you look at that last spot, we both have a guy who struggled last year.
2 nice question marks, as I like to call these last 2 right here.
And I think that the reasoning behind this is like they weren't necessarily in the best situation. So I have Odell Beckham. You have Juju Smith-Schuster. I like both these guys this year. But why Juju?
Okay, so I went Juju purposely because if you think about last year, he was a projected first-round fantasy pick. People took him in the first round in a lot of leagues. I know a lot of people that took him in late first round, early second round. He was considered a top 7 receiver in fantasy. What happens? He battles injuries all year. Big Ben misses almost the entire season. Who's throwing the ball to Juju? Mason Rudolph. I mean, Mason Rudolph couldn't hit Juju if there was nobody covering him and there's nobody else on the field. So Juju had a down year because of the quarterback situation. Ben Roethlisberger, from what I hear, he's completely healthy. He's been working out hard. If Ben's healthy and Juju's healthy, Juju, in my opinion, will certainly be a top 10 wide receiver in fantasy. And, of course, this is a risk because of injury. But you know what? Sometimes you got to, as we say, you got to go bold. And I think Juju, if all goes well, will be a top 10 wide receiver. And,
listen, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Continue after you're done.
All you.
All right. I agree with everything you said. I think that Mason Rudolph was just bad. I think that's really it. I don't necessarily know if it was Juju that was bad. I just think that Mason Rudolph was bad.
And they had Duck Hodges too. I mean, come on. You can't be a good receiver when you got a guy named Duck throwing you the football. He's throwing you ducks. So.
Exactly. I mean, it's an awful name for a quarterback if you really think about it.
Awful.
Listen, I think that the Steelers are also going to have a better year this year. I think that regardless, Big Ben, if it was anybody else throwing the ball last year than what they had, they would have been a playoff team. I mean, that defense is outstanding. I think it's going to keep that offense on the field a lot more. It's going to give Juju a lot more opportunities to catch passes. I know their running game's not great. I know they don't have a lot of other offensive weapons. I think that Ben Roethlisberger has a bounce-back year and Juju has a good year. I don't know if it's necessarily top 10, but it's definitely fringe for me. It's right there. But that leads into exactly what you're going to say. That leads into my guy, Odell Beckham, who
I like this, though. I really like this at 10.
You probably have him like right around there as well, I got to think, right?
I had him at like 14, 15.
Okay, so a little lower than I might have thought. Look, Odell Beckham has had a roller coaster of 2 seasons. First going from the Giants, having a good year after coming back after being injured to getting that huge contract. And then Dave Gettleman just saying bye-bye and sending him off after signing him to a huge extension, which is really strange. Do you remember what they got for that? Was it a third and a fifth?
It was they got Jabril Peppers, first, and another player I'm drawing a blank on. But no one really panned out.
They got a first-round pick from him?
Yeah, but they wasted on DeAndre Baker, who's going to jail for life. So
Yeah, okay, right. Well, listen, regardless or not, I mean, that just shows you how this is completely off topic, but how bad of a general manager Bill O'Brien is. This guy got a second, and a second and David Johnson for
yeah.
Jay
Oh my God.
Hopkins.
For David Johnson and DeAndre Hopkins. Yeah, they actually flipped fourth rounders. The Cardinals got the Houston's fourth round pick this year for the Cardinals' fourth round pick next year, and then we threw in David Johnson and a second for DeAndre Hopkins, second round pick. I said that right.
I mean, if you just look at what the Bills got for Diggs, if you look at what the Giants got for Odell Beckham on a big contract already, he already had the contract signed.
And the crazy part is Hopkins blows both of them away. It's not even close. Not even close. I don't think Hopkins dropped the pass all year last year. He's a proven top 2 receiver year in and year out for the last 4 or 5 years. And you're telling me you can't get a first-round pick for him? As a Cardinal fan, I loved it, but Bill O'Brien, I'm sorry. Stick to coaching, not GM.
I'm very interested to see the Deshaun Watson situation there and see if he even signs a new contract there. But, well, that's like once like you said earlier, that's a story for another day. Odell Beckham, real quick. Baker Mayfield's going to have a better year. The Browns are going to have a better year. I think Odell Beckham will benefit, and he's really due a redemption season. I think this is the one he gets.
Yeah, no doubt in my mind. He's probably the most talented receiver of all time. He just can't put it together ever since those golden years with the Giants.
Yep.
We'll see. Baker's going to have a lot better protection. You still got Jarvis Landry. So, listen, you can't go wrong putting Odell in the top 10 ever. It's always a risk, but you know what? Why not?
Yeah, no, I agree.
Now we're going to move on to our final category. That is the tight end position. Tight ends, I feel like every year in fantasy-wise, they're just scarce. Outside of your top 4, maybe your top 5, tight ends are scarce. Looking at the rankings, you and I flipped Kelsey and Kittle. Listen, give me either one of them the way I look at it. I like Kelsey a little bit better just because if you're going up against San Francisco, who are you going to shut down outside the Kittle? You know, they don't really have a number 1 proven receiver, and they run the ball a lot. So that's why I went Kelsey, just because he's been the number 1 tight end for the last 3-4 years. Mahomes loves him, but I'll take either one in the fantasy draft.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, Kelsey, Kittle, flip a coin. That's basically what I did for that
Exactly.
one. I mean, we're not going to differ much there, but
no.
Hold on one second. Yeah, basically, like I said, flip the coin. Going to number 3, I have Ertz. You have Andrews. This is going to go along with my theory that I think the Ravens take a step back. I think Andrews benefited from everybody keening in on Lamar. I think that he's still a very good tight end, but I think he drops a little. I have him at 7. What do you like about him?
I love Andrews so much because he's Lamar's number 1 guy. They got Marquise Hollywood Brown on the outside, but Lamar loves to throw the ball down the seams, and who's always down the seams? Big Mark Andrews. They got rid of Hayden Hurst, the backup tight end, who was actually a first-round pick a couple of years ago. So that's going to open it up even more for Mark Andrews. They also had the guy Boyle, another backup tight end, who's good at blocking. I love Andrews. He's Lamar's number 1 target. I have him and Zach Ertz. They're kind of like a tie. I went Andrews just because of Wentz's questionability to stay healthy. When
I can see
Wentz goes down, I don't know who's throwing the ball to Zach Ertz. I don't know how much Jalen Hurts is going to be able to hit Zach Ertz as much as Carson Wentz. I know Wentz loves him. He's his number 1 guy, but Wentz's health question for me is what essentially made me put Ertz 4 and Andrews 3.
Okay. Well, that's interesting because I do have Ertz 3. I do think that he is a very solid tight end, especially when Wentz is playing. I don't love their receiving core, so I think that he relies on Ertz a lot. But moving off 3, I have Austin Hooper. You have him at 9.
Way down to 9.
I have him at 4. I mean, I'm a little biased because Austin Hooper really helped me last year. I got him off the waiver wire. I was even for a little bit in one of my leagues, which might end up being a keeper league. I was even thinking about maybe keeping him as one of my 2 guys because I could keep a non-drafted player, which is like a 15th. You get to keep the 15th round pick in my – that basically counts as losing the 15th. So I was thinking about it. But I like Hooper. I mean, once again, Cleveland Browns are going to have a better season. This is the whole where I'm going through here. I wasn't so hot on them even maybe a few weeks ago, but I started really like digging around after the schedule came out. I just like their ability to win games this year. And I think Baker just can't be as bad. So I like Hooper at 4 a lot.
I like Hooper. I don't like him all the way at 4 just because new scenery, new team, Baker Mayfield. How many times I feel like the past couple years were people so high on David Njoku in this new huge Cleveland offense with all these weapons.
Mhm,
Everybody thought Njoku would be open over the middle, and Baker Mayfield just never looked for him.
mhm.
So they gave
Yeah.
Hooper a lot of money, so they have to face him in the offense one way or another. But until I know Hooper is going to contribute in this new scene, in this new offense, I can't put him in the top 4 just yet. But I
Mhm,
do think he has top 5 ability. I just am not certain on it, and I'm not going to bank on it. Too much of a risk for me.
mhm. Yeah, listen, I get it. The tight ends, in my opinion, are just volatile in general. I
Yeah,
mean,
they're just a dime a dozen.
if you get away from the first two, even in my opinion, maybe three,
Hmm.
then you're looking at a bunch of guys. I mean, we have one on here. I mean, Evan Ingram, just to touch that quick, I think that the Giants just have no choice but to throw him the ball. So I think I like him. That's the
Yeah.
reason why I have him high.
Hmm.
Eight's a good spot for him too, though, because I could see it being very
Yeah.
volatile. But I think a
Right.
good person to talk about here is who I have at number 6 and who you have at 10. What do you
Hmm.
think the Buccaneers are going to get out of Gronk this year?
So I honestly, it's $1 million question to me. Everybody, I think, is just assuming Gronk is going to be the Gronk of old. But you know what? It's 2020. It's not 2014. So I'm looking at this as the most realistic possibility through the most realistic lens that I possibly can. And that's the fact that Gronk missed an entire year of football in retirement. No one knew he was coming back. No one knows what shape he's in. I put him in my top 10 just because he's Rob Gronkowski and he's playing with Tom Brady. But I really just don't know how Gronk is going to be, especially with all the weapons that they have in Tampa Bay and OJ Howard, who's one great backup to have, an athletic freak. Um, I don't know about Gronk. I know you have him. I see 6. I like that. But for me, I would put him anywhere from 10 to like the 13 kind of range just because there's so much of a question mark.
Mhm.
What do
Look,
you think?
it's like you said, it's maybe the biggest question mark out of anything
It really
that I've
is.
ranked today. I mean, honestly, there's been a lot of very straightforward guys. It's not like I'm doing
Mhm,
rocket science here. It's
mhm.
everybody can name half these players.
Right.
But I like Gronk at 6 because I like the upside. That's the main reason why I like Gronk here,
Okay.
especially because the tight end position is so volatile. I'll say it again. So I go with upside with tight ends because
Mhm.
I do think that worst case scenario, what happens? You draft Gronk in like the 6th, 7th round, maybe. I don't even
Yeah.
maybe earlier. It depends on like
Right.
what the rated tight ends are going.
Mhm.
But worst case scenario, you end up taking the number 1 or 2 tight end off the waiver wire, who ends up being better than the top 5 tight ends anyway. So it's like, in my opinion, I just think that I
Mhm.
don't know. I don't know how people are with tight ends. 90% of the time with me, I end up streaming them quite often because I end up getting stuck like worrying about more solidified skill positions because tight end, even like the best sometimes can just not perform. So I don't know. Anything other than getting one of those top 3 guys, I think there's no reason why you shouldn't
Yeah.
be interested in Gronk. That's my
Right.
opinion.
I like it. For me, I had a couple guys ahead of him. I really like Darren Waller. He had some big weeks, and then he also had some not so good weeks. But I do have him at 5 just because I like the potential of production on a week by week basis. But what I really like is Tyler Higbee and the way he picked it up at the end of the year. The last like 4 or 5 weeks, you could probably make the argument Tyler Higbee was the best tight end in fantasy football. I
Mhm.
mean, Goff was just firing the ball to Tyler Higbee constantly after Gerald Everett went down with injury.
Mhm.
So I like Tyler Higbee a lot. I know in my fantasy championship last year, he absolutely murdered me, Tyler Higbee. I think he put up like 30. I lost by 200, but I'm not even going to get into that. Um, but I like Tyler Higbee. I see you have him all the way down at 10. Also, looking at your rankings, what do you think of Hunter Henry?
Hunter Henry is interesting. I thought that he was a candidate to be a top 5
Mm-hmm.
tight end last year. I don't really. Let me see. Hold on. Where he finished last year, according to ESPN PPR, he finished 10th. Um, so that was a little bit of a disappointment. Only 650 yards and 5 touchdowns. I think the guy is very talented,
Mm-hmm.
but we're just not sure if he's ever going to be the same. Tore his ACL 2 years
Right.
ago.
He's another one of those question mark health guys. Yep.
Yep. And I also just I don't love the quarterback situation there
No,
right now. You said
you're
it
right.
earlier. I mean, Tyrod Taylor, he's all right. I mean,
I
it's
think he's
not
got
like
starting job for more than 4 or 5 weeks.
Right,
So,
exactly. It's just grooming Justin Herbert or letting Herbert just
mhm.
sit back and watch the speed of an NFL game, in
Yeah.
my opinion.
Yep.
I think that Herbert's really the candidate to play most of the year, in my opinion. I think
Yeah.
no way they're going into there relying on Tyrod
Right. I
Taylor.
mean, a couple years ago in Cleveland, Taylor was the starter over Mayfield for what, 3 weeks, and then that was it. Mayfield came in, never looked back. So I don't know if Herbert's going to be like Mayfield, but I do think Herbert's going to take over almost as quick, maybe a little slower though
Mhm.
than Mayfield did. But Herbert's going to take control of that offense by probably like week 6, week 7. And it's a big question mark. Hunter Henry, is he one of the most talented, athletic tight
Mhm.
ends in football? No question,
Yep.
but the guy can't stay healthy. So I still have him kind of high at 7, just because if he's healthy, you're going to get a lot of point production out of him. And
Mhm.
that's the name of the game, points in fantasy football.
Yep. Yep. And then
So,
the last thing, I mean, when we talked about Waller and Higbee, I have them a little lower than you do. I mean, Higbee, just touch on Higbee for a second. I
yeah,
like him. I don't like Jared Goff. That's really the reason
that's fair.
why I don't love him.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just going to throw in one last sleeper, and then we could close
Yeah.
this out. Once
Yeah, I
again,
got one
I don't
too,
want to
but
even be
unless it's the
biased,
same.
but I'm going to be because I've firsthand watched this guy. I like Chris Herndon this year as a bounce back candidate. The guy 2 years ago was absolutely lethal. I mean, he produced top 5 quarterback, geez, top 5 tight end weeks multiple
Mm-hmm.
times with Sam Darnold at quarterback. They had a very good connection. Unfortunately, got into a little bit of legal trouble before going into the season last year, and then played one healthy half before hurting his leg again, I believe, and didn't really get a chance to see him. But I think the Jets think he's a budding star. They got
Mm-hmm.
him in the 4th round a couple seasons ago. And I just think that there's a lot of chemistry between those two. And I do think that that's a guy to keep an eye on. Once again,
Mm-hmm.
tight ends are volatile. So he could
Yeah.
be, for all we know, he could be the number 5 tight end this year. He could be the number 25 tight end this year because
Mm-hmm.
that's just how it is with tight ends. But I do like him as a bounce back candidate.
Yeah. I can't say I love Chris Herndon so much just because I haven't watched that much of him and I don't know too much of his numbers. But a couple guys that were late bloomers last year, and I mean like really, really late bloomers, were 3 tight ends who I have in mind. That's Mike Gesicki out of the Dolphins.
Mhm.
It's just the quarterback situation is a little scary for me right now. But Mike Gesicki, he was a beast coming down the stretch. Also, Noah Fant in Denver. This kid could be, I mean, if you look at his build, he actually kind of looks like Gronk 2.0. Noah Fant, he's an absolute athletic beast. So I like him a lot. And then the last tight end is Jared Cook. A lot of people had him in their top 5 rankings last year. He struggled mightily until the end of the year when Breeze was finally starting to hit him, kind of like a throwback Jimmy Graham in that New Orleans
Yep.
offense, somewhat towards the end of the year. Those are 3 guys that just to look out for in your fantasy draft. They have some great, potential value late in drafts that are not in my top 10. So those are my 3 sleepers for the tight end position. And overall, I really like what we did so far, you and I today.
Yeah, I think we brought forward some pretty good points. I
Mm-hmm.
think that this is a very, very informative video, and I hope that anybody out there watching it really uses this to their advantage when
Definitely.
they draft. Obviously, we're in May.
Mm-hmm.
We probably got most people have 3 months
Yeah.
until the draft day. So look, these rankings can easily change. Things fluctuate.
100%.
People still get traded. People get cut.
Yep.
So we'll see. I mean, probably do another video like this in a couple weeks when it gets a little
Yeah.
bit closer and see where we are. But I know we talked about maybe teasing a mock draft as our next video. So see where we like guys actually positional fits based on their overall ranking, not just by position.
Exactly. We're going to combine all the knowledge we gave you guys today and put it in an actual mock draft, maybe 2-round, 3-round mock draft. Who knows? You guys are going to have to stay and find out because on episode 5, it's going to be a really cool mock draft. And, maybe later, right as soon as we get around to football season, Maddie, you and I will come back, do this same exact segment and see what differs between now and then. But guys, you are really all the real ones for sticking around with us. We appreciate it. Let us know your fantasy rankings and if you liked or hated our fantasy rankings. Until next time, take care.